In the previous tutorial, we started adding some interaction between our character Bob here and his environment. And basically what we did was, when you were in collision with the desk and you hit the space bar, it would bring up a dialog container. And if you were no longer in collision with that desk, it would go away. Well, now we want to start adding some real dynamic interactions and populating our dialog container with actual text. And the way we're going to do that is by using the text object and variables. Let's start with talking about variables. So all a variable is in programming is basically a container that holds information. It can hold text, it can hold numbers, and additionally, variables can be attached and developed to specific objects. It can be attached to entire scenes, and it can be attached to the entire program. And basically what that does is it creates what's called as a scope of the variable. And the best way to describe the scope is basically how the where and how the program sees a variable. So for example, when you're thinking about where you want to attach your variables, you want to ask yourself a very important question, which is this: how important is it for my program to see this variable? Is this interaction that we're going to create today between Bob and the desk, is that an interaction that needs to be seen by the entire program? In other words, 2 or 3 scenes that we create later on, do those other scenes need to know about this interaction between Bob and the desk? If the answer is no, then move down to the next level. Next level here would be scene. In this scene that we've created, is it important that the whole scene be able to see this interaction between Bob and the desk? Well, no, again. Okay, so go down then one more level. Really, the scope, or where this variable is seen, is only important between Bob and the desk. So let's attach our variables then to the desk itself. This will also help with organization of your game as well. So let's right-click on the desk and let's do Edit Object Variables. And let's create a variable that's just within the scope of the desk. Only the desk really sees this variable. And let's call it dialog. Naming your variables is very important. You want to have something that makes sense, right? We're going to input dialog in this, so it makes sense we call it dialog. And you can also give a value to this variable right now, and we'll just put in quotes, "This is my desk." This information now is being stored in this variable, this container. So let's hit apply. We need a way to display this variable's information, and for that we're going to use a text object right here. And I'm going to call this txt, right, to show that it's a text object. And I'm going to call it text dialog. I'm going to leave this here. You can modify this right here. If there's nothing that's going to be changed, you could just put your text in right there. I'm going to leave it as just text. What I don't like to do is blank it out, because then you can't actually see the object. So let's keep that text in there and let's hit apply. Now let's drag our text object onto the scene. And right now, this text is a part of the base layer. Remember, we talked about the difference between layers here, base layer. And you have to ask yourself, do you really want this text object to show up all the time in your base layer? Well, the answer is no. You want it to actually just be attached to our dialog container. So in order to do that, we'll click on that, and then click on our properties panel, and let's change the association of that object to the dialog layer. Close that up. Now we can drag it over to our actual dialog container because it's associated with it now. We'll open it up a little bit for some space. And now if we did that correctly, it should only show up, the text object should only show up when we make the dialog layer visible. There it is. Okay, but now we want to make that text actually say what we stored in our variable. So let's go to our code, and in our Bob and his furniture section, we have when Bob is in collision with the desk, move Bob away, stop the object, and then we have a sub condition to that that says when the space key is released, let's show the dialog layer. Well, let's add to showing the dialog layer, we also want to load up our text. And here's how we do that. So we want our text object, right? And we want to modify that text. Here's our actual object, the text dialog. We want to set that equal to. Now you could just type in the text here in double quotes. This is my desk, and then close quote. But we want to just use variables so that we can change it up when need be. So for that, we're going to click this button here. And if this were a global variable or a scene variable, you could click this. But it's not. It's actually a variable that's attached to an object. And for that, we need to go to Common Expressions for all objects and Variables. Click on Objects Variable. And now remember it's attached to our desk. And here's where naming matters. So you can't just kind of click a button here and get it in, but I remember that I called this variable dialog. So I can put that in and hit apply. It says you must enter blah blah blah, just ignore it. Hit OK. Now if we did this correctly, when we hit the space key, it should load our variable information from dialog into the text object and show it. Ideally, we would want this to happen first, so we can maneuver this up so that it executes the load first of the information and then the show. Let's see if that works. There it is.